Do you want to start off with introductions?
Yeah.
Funny how easily we are.
Is that what was supposed to be?
Very news.
Okay.
No, I was,
So everyone has everything, and the first thing is introductions. I'm Steve Olenoff from the Planning Board.
Ann Delaney from the Recreation Commission.
Todd Corson, Public Works.
RJ Shear, Conservation.
Conservation agent.
Mary Ann Carter, Disability Commission.
Joe Privatero.
The former conservation.
Former Concom.
Yeah.
Todd Sullivan, Conservation.
Chuck Sheehan, Youth Sports. Outdoor interests.
Kristen Starr, Westwood Land Trust.
Nicole Banks, Recreation Director.
Michael Gay, Youth Sports as well.
Oh, sorry, I'm taking notes on everybody's names. I'm Jen Goldson, I'm one of the consultants.
And I'm Gino Colucci, the other consultant. And I was planning to thank you all for changing the meeting from tomorrow night to tonight, but on second thought, you might want to thank me.
Nora Lockname, Director of Community and Economic Development.
Hi, I'm John Hickey. I'm the chairman of the Board of Selectmen, and in my somewhat spare time, I'm the coordinator of Mite Hockey in Westwood.
Pam King, Westwood Environmental Action Committee.
And I'm Abby McCabe, Town Planner.
Okay. So the first thing we want to do is Nora, is to do our open space inventory.
Right.
Questions came up about that, and now I'll do all the answers.
And the goal was to get that up here so that we could share it all with you and go through the town's online mapping system. The internet, for some reason, is telling me there's no connection, so unless I have anyone who's a whiz at this, I think we're going to have to go with paper. I only have a dozen copies, so if we could share every other person, that would probably be the best way to do it. What we've done is we've started putting together an inventory of all the town-owned properties, Conservation Commission properties, as well as just general town-owned, Sewer Commission, Water District, and then a bunch of privately owned properties that have some level of restriction or protection on them. And I wanted to go through these with everyone just very briefly. I was hoping to be able to show you the sites as we went through, and to make sure that we've captured them all, to see if anyone has any thoughts of sites that we might have missed here. I know there's further work that needs to be done to divide them out into different categories, so we're starting with the inventory that was put together for the last open space plan, building on that and moving in that direction.
They're asking us to share.
So I know, I think we have enough. I know at our last meeting, Joe Carpetera, you mentioned Prout Farm, which was one that had been acquired since the last iteration, and I know that made it onto this list. That is listed as a Conservation Commission controlled property. Let's see where.
So what does the CA mean?
Conservation area.
Conservation? So how is this? You must know them all.
It changes every year.
So Prout Farm is on the first page, about 3/4 of the way down. Prout Farm, Conservation Area, Fiber Tree Street. It's 22.65 acres. Ignore the zoning category here. Everything for some reason came out as listed in SRC. That's not the case. So I have to go back and correct that. Prout Farm is listed with a zoning, with a tax assessor's code 903, which I believe is the open space category.
There seem to be mostly 903s. There's a 900 I see. You know what that is?
You might be more familiar with what the categories are.
900.
There's a 900 and a 132, and most of them, the rest seem to be 903s. So there's a whole bunch of 900s.
Yeah, I think 900's maybe, no, it's on the Board of Selectmen. I don't remember the codes, all the codes off the top of my head. I know the, like 132, some of these may not be correct or may need to be updated, because 132, I believe, is vacant land in the residential district not protected. Which that may be accurate for that piece.
That may be accurate for that piece, and it's probably mischaracterized as being managed by the Conservation Commission. That's probably
Oh,
not
no, the
accurate.
one I was looking at was under Board of Selectmen, but maybe there's one on this page too.
Yeah, 900 is United States government.
Yeah, I thought that, but I.
So where do these codes come from?
Their state, the state Department of Revenue creates these codes, every town uses the same set of codes. And they're, the 900, all the 900s are tax exempt properties. And then the 600s, 700s, 800s are chapter lands, 3 different chapter land categories.
Oh, the temple.
So those from 600 above are mostly what we're interested in.
So these are just codes that are used to categorize land for assessors purposes and other town uses.
And they should indicate whether it's, has a conservation restriction on it or not. So if it, the 903s should all be restricted to be protected open space. And other numbers like the 130 and 132 are just vacant space, not protected in any way. When we get down further, we have just a couple of parcels that are have agricultural restrictions on them. Those are 601, that's on the last page.
Nora, do we
I'm
wanna-
sorry, 713 are the agricultural restrictions. 601, I'm not sure what that
That's
is.
forestry.
Do we wanna add, like, obviously where something's missing or gotta
Yes,
be
yeah,
missing?
so if you, if
All right, so why don't we
anything
just
pops
start
out,
going
Right.
down the list, start with page 1. And so page 1 is all of the town's conservation land.
all of the, on page 1, it's all the land that's under the Conservation Commission's management. Listed that way in our tax assessor's records. That's not to say all those records are accurate. There could be some that are missed, that are just under General Board of Selectmen, and there could be some that are under Conservation Commission that don't have protections on them.
No, I don't see Blue Hills Vista on there,
Blue Hills Vista, do you,
under Concom.
you know where, what, the tax assessor doesn't always list it by that name, so they might have,
There's a few Blue Hill listings, but
I don't think they use the Blue Hill name at all. You're talking about the area above University Ave?
Waiting from the registry of deeds? Because the town does
Well-
maps every time.
What you're talking about is that area
It's
above.
that buffer area that we have between University Ave and.
that's on
Okay.
here, that is on here, I don't, it's probably on the second page, under the, Board of Selectmen properties. I wish I could get to the internet, because I could show it to you, and then we'd find out what the code is.
Karen, what's the rear Birch Tree Drive sewer pump station? Is that just a former before they,
Where is that?
second one down?
That one is listed as a sewer pump station, I don't see a station there.
No.
That's the parcel that backs up to the Dedham Westwood Water District
Right.
parcel. So if you're going down Conant Road, it's on the left-hand side behind those houses,
Okay.
and then it backs up onto Dedham Westwood
No,
Water
there's no
District.
station there, I'm just wondering if that was, I don't know. And
It's
it-
probably miskeyed, so.
Yeah, cause it says manager, conservation commission, where the other stations under 903 have sewer commission as their manager.
All right, so we'll
So
correct
I
that.
can check with Rich tomorrow. I'll just shoot him a call and see if that was something, I didn't even know if he had said maybe something back in the past that, I don't know. Maybe.
I don't know either, if maybe they were planning a sewer pump
Yeah.
station there. Just looking at the map, just zooming in on the aerial shot, there's no evident pump station
No.
there.
Can we back up to that Blue Hills Vista?
Yes.
What it says here is, a path passes through the property starting at the Conservation Commission's right-of-way off Partridge Drive. So is this listed under Partridge?
It could be, it
I'm
could be.
looking.
They're all listed by plat and lot number, and I know it's on here because I remember the shape of the
Right.
property. But I can't tell you offhand where it's listed.
No.
Okay.
No, that's back on.
I'll make a note of it and make sure we note it as Blue Hill Vista Conservation Area, and I'll
I've
find out
got-
where it was.
I've got most of the Ds to the Concom.
On this list, we also have, I don't think it's on this version that I printed out, but we have the book and page for every property. So
When you
we
say
have
book
those
and page,
listed.
you talking about the registry of deeds?
Yes,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay, so there is a,
Yeah.
well, I don't know, is this the same thing, rear of Blue Hill Drive on page 3?
I honestly can't tell you without being able to call it up, so
Yeah,
I'm at a loss there. But if you can think of any properties that you don't, that aren't evidently listed here by their name under the site name, bring them up and I'll make sure I check them. Sure. See if that's any
It's
better.
gonna be slow.
so if we wanted to check these ourselves, we'd go on the town website and where would we look?
So if you go onto the maps online, if you go to the town's website, you go to the community development page, and on the left-hand side, there'll be a menu, and you can find online mapping tool. If you go, you just click on that, it takes you to our maps online, and there's a button that you can push that says find, and you go into the find button and you enter the parcel number that's shown on the map, and it'll key you into that parcel.
You tell me where to go.
Okay.
You do other stuff.
Town hall,
Westwood.
yep. Town of Westwood.
All right, so we're on the first page. Joe, do you see any more that are missing, or?
I'm working on it, Steve. Just keep going, I'll swing back.
All right, any other questions on page 1? We'll go on to page 2, which is all listed under, it's page 2, and then
Page 2
it
and
runs
on
on to page 3.
Right, so these are parcels that are in town ownership that have not yet been protected in a way that they would be managed by the Conservation Commission. A lot of them are obvious properties, like the municipal buildings in town, fire station, police station, library, cemetery, Open Baker House, various practice fields. The former First Parish land is under this category that was purchased by the town recently, but it was not dedicated for conservation, so that stays here. That has a code of 130, which indicates it's just vacant land. School Street Playground, Municipal Parking Lot, Islington Library, Islington Community Center, Islington Fire Station. June Street Playground, I believe the June Street conservation area is on the previous page. The playground is here, Sheehan Fields. And then as you go on to the next page, you get into all the sewer properties. I'm not sure, Todd, that each of these has a pump station, or if some of them are
Yeah,
just,
checking these now, these are all good, with the exception of missing Sycamore is the 10 pump station.
Sycamore?
Yep, and our 11th pump station will now be Fox Meadow,
Okay,
and that's gonna be, I think we're taking that over, I gotta check the exact date, but we're in talks of taking it over officially July 1. So.
okay, so we'll add those. And then we have the various school properties.
All right, let's stop there, though. Look at this list. So I see things like Sandy Valley Road, 15-016. So that would be a question right there, is that supposed to be conservation land, or what is that? Dead Swamp Road. There is a Canton Street, that might just be at the end of the Canton Street near the Rotary, but you have to look that up.
Okay, so give me a number that you want me to look up, I'll find it.
Oh, okay, so 15-016.
That's it. So you got whatever the
Big game hill. Big game.
I'd like to look at that. Maybe like that one. Okay, 15016 is this parcel at the end of Sandy Valley Road. So it's part of what we call the Lowell Woods. It's not one of the original, it's not one of the Lowell parcels, I don't believe.
Right. So that's an example of something right there that probably should be designated as conservation land.
And probably hasn't. So that has a code of 132. So it's just vacant land.
There's another one, 09-230, also on Sandy Valley Road.
with me. That looks like, I'm not getting any further. So the
Right.
ones, if it has a code of 903, that means it probably has the conservation restrictions, but the tax assessor has not noted it in the records as being managed by the Conservation Commission yet. So that's the purpose of this
Yeah.
exercise, so that we can get them properly coded for the inventory going forward.
So who is going to go down one by one and check these all out?
I'm in the process of doing that now, so
Okay.
I guess what I wanna make sure though is that the overall inventory that we're starting with has all of the parcels that ought to be on it,
Right.
that the tax assessor didn't miss any parcels. These are all the parcels that the town owns,
So
and
that's,
all the parcels that private organizations own that are dedicated to open space.
so that's something tough to do, it's tough to find things that just are not even there.
So Nora, I don't see the tot lot on this, I see the other playgrounds.
Okay, so the tot lot is not in, you mean the Lions Club tot lot?
Yeah.
That is not an individual
COA
lot, it's part of COA and part of Thurston.
Okay.
Would it be possible if it was mapped, people might be able to see missing properties easier if they saw it on a map and they know, there's a property on this road, but I don't see it listed on the map.
That's what she was hoping
Yes,
to do.
yeah, that's
No,
what-
I know one by one, but I'm just wondering if they had a map that they could get PDF with
That
all of
shows
these
the
already
conservation-
labeled.
Not in the short term, I
Yeah.
think we could get to that, but not.
Right,
not
okay.
the next couple
So
of
do you
weeks.
have a layer in the town GPS where you can just say conservation land and all of that shows and then
No,
other kinds?
we
of-
don't, we can have our GIS director create a map like that, but it's not a layer that you can turn on. You can search by owner, so you can search by town of Westwood, by Dedham Country Polo Club, there are ways to search that way and call up all the lots, but we don't have a map, there's not a layer that's conservation.
Okay,
But I think you can search by land use code as well.
Because it was,
Mhm.
yeah, it's on
And then, so that will.
To
that's-
create the map, right, but the online version doesn't highlight more than one parcel
Oh,
at a
At a
time.
time.
Right,
Okay.
so you would have to
Yeah,
have
so
a
you would
map
have to-
created that
right,
would do
right.
that.
the old Sheehan tennis court.
You
Is
can
that-
get
I
the
don't know if that-
listing
I
of
don't
all
think
of the
that's part of
parcels,
Sheehan.
and then you can click on each one to see where it is.
I don't know what that is.
Comes up as no results.
Like Buckmaster
Hmm.
Pond,
Yeah.
if that's on here.
so is that a worthwhile thing to get a GIS?
The pond is nowhere
A
Yeah,
though.
A
The-
bench
the
on
What
this
land-
about that little park right there?
The park is ours.
Yeah.
we can request that they have a map like that produced for the, visioning session with the parcels that we know we have. There it is. Okay, so 09, it's an understripe instead of a dash.
Not a dash sign.
So this was the other parcel you asked for, Steve, this is 09230. It's a pond behind Farm Lane.
Wait a minute,
Underwood.
That's Haslam Pond?
Top of page 2,
Funny
Steve.
that Cherry Valley Road.
No, I don't think it's Haslam
Oh.
Pond, it's a small
Work on
pond,
that one.
oh, nice, so that's,
it's on the other side.
it's a pond. So that's not really Sandy Valley Road?
Well, it backs up onto Sandy Valley Road, the access is from Sandy Valley Road, this is Farm Lane near Pleasant Valley.
Yeah.
Behind Fox Hill, so in the bigger picture, it's kinda hard to show, here's the lot, do you see it?
Yeah.
It's off of Sandy Valley Road, it's part of the larger Lowell Woods hiking area. But it was probably purchased or donated to the town in a different transaction. So we have all the books and pages for all the properties.
Buckmaster Pond,
Buckmaster is on here, portion,
Oh, well,
part of
that's-
it,
or the grassy area by the pond.
the Sheehan Fields,
Oh, is that part of Sheehan Fields as well? Cause we were gonna ask about the old Sheehan tennis court.
so Sheehan Fields is where the baseball fields and soccer fields are, that's one parcel, and then there's another parcel that is the parking area for the pond, Buckmaster Pond. And then there's a third parcel that is the portion of the pond that's accessible off of High Street, not
Yeah,
Pond
it's
Street.
across from
Alright, so
Sunoco.
they're on here, we just don't see it. And so the little tennis court, rundown tennis court on Sheehan is part of
That's
Sheehan
on,
Field?
that's on Sheehan Fields, which is that's on here on the last,
Yeah, I saw
One,
that, I
two.
just didn't see the Buckmaster Pond one.
it is probably called something else. Like I see this, on the first page,
I did
Pitts,
see Sheehan Fields, I can't find it now.
Rhine Start Conservation Area Buckmaster Pond. It's blocked out, so you don't see the whole thing. It's about the sixth one from the bottom on the first page. That's part of Buckmaster.
Oh, so it is the bottom, Sheehan
Alright,
Fields.
so a lot of these don't have anything in the first column, they don't have a name.
That's
Oh, I
right.
wouldn't know that. I
Because the
wouldn't know
tax
that.
assessor doesn't have a name on it, so
Oh,
that's,
that one. Oh, yeah, I
that's
wouldn't
part
have
of
known
what
it
we're
was
working
Buckmaster.
towards.
So it'd be
Yeah.
nice to
Yeah.
give everything a name, or at least some kind of recognition as a description of, you know, what it is.
Extra column, informal.
So we can fill these in, because as we're going down it, so you got to the sewer pumping stations, the next ones are the schools,
Before we hit the school, Steve,
yeah,
Nora, can we just take a look at, almost like a spike strip, but it's conservation, off of Cherry Street, remember the Underwood property? And it came up when they ran the gas line down most recently. But there is land there that comes under the town, now whether it's exactly conservation, I'm not sure.
so you're saying it's not listed anywhere?
I don't see it anywhere.
Okay. So how many things do you have now that you didn't see at all?
3.
So I have Blue Hills Vista.
Yep.
And that's gotta be on here somewhere.
I'm sure it is. I know it's in here, I just don't remember.
Just
What
probably
was the other
doesn't,
one?
probably doesn't have a name in front of it,
Look, I got
which is
the
why.
deeds here.
And then the spice strip near Meditech? That's what you
Yes,
said?
yes.
And what's the third one? Or second one?
I'll go with 2 for now. Oh, no.
Alright, so we have the sewer pump stations, then we have the schools, and then there's a bunch of with no names in front.
So those last ones after the schools,
And
They're
all
all
of them say
homeowners association.
Westwood
so they
Affordable.
say on the right-hand side what they, who they're owned by. So those are various affordable housing properties. Some of them are
Oh.
listed in town ownership, some are listed in Waha
Can we just pass
ownership.
that down? I'd like it back. Nora, there's the parcel
Here's the.
there, the deed's probably on the other page.
Came prepared.
Always.
Karen told me to. I always listen to her.
Okay, yep, yep, it doesn't have the plat and lot though, so the only way I can search it now is by plat and lot. Let me see if we can,
Oh, did you look on the other side for the deed? The deeds are in there too.
I doubt that would have referenced it by assessor's plat.
Yeah, you should, please. No, it's
A lot of this wasn't recorded during the commission's those golden years.
Yeah, I don't see anything that listed by plat and lot, but I'll call it up on here and see if we can.
Good, I got the 3. And the CD property out.
How big is it?
This was like a spike strip.
Oh, okay.
Little patch on it, it came up.
Snapped up.
You gotta see the
So
language
it's
for the
just
condition,
loose.
how you could run the gas main through it. Pat asked me.
See if I can find another one.
Okay.
But it's 30 feet long.
All right, so Joe, that is shown on here. If I can get big enough to get the plat and lot, no, Catherine brought it. It's 17,190. So I don't think that's listed. I don't see it on either the first or the second page, which is where it would have been.
Sue said it was, I could never nail it down.
All right, so 17,190, and that's 4,356 square feet.
4,000.
Is there 9.1 acres for Buckmaster Pond?
Alright, so moving on, after the schools, we have the affordable housing parcels. Then we have the water district parcels, like the water tank and the wells on University Ave. 200 Dover Road is what that is, but that's all the Dedham Westwood Water
Those are all
District.
Dedham Westwood Water District properties. So 200 Dover Road is a former wellhead site that they still own,
And then next is Hale Reservation,
right?
and that's all the property the Hale Reservation owns?
That's all of the property in Westwood, and you can see various codes. Some of it is listed as protected, but a lot of it isn't. And while the code's listed as protected, I don't think it's permanently protected.
So there's a 905, what is a large amount, the largest amount, almost, well, the second largest amount is 112 acres is 905, and what is 905?
I don't know.
I'm gonna have to- My contribution to this conversation.
Right.
Nora, those Dedham Westwood Water District sites, they're inactive?
That's Lee Pond.
One of them is inactive. One of them, the Dover Road, there's a former well. It is, and they still use it to protect the aquifer,
Donate to the water,
but they
right?
don't draw water from there because it's contaminated by one of the tribunals. Many years ago, on the Dover Road, there was a plume
It's leaking.
that I think ran from,
High Street.
yeah.
Well, I guess if
created
we
that
were
one.
trying to create more conservation restricted land, would preclude them from agreeing to that.
Yes, we do.
That's near.
They may be willing to
So
permanently
it'd be
restrict
something
it.
we should.
As long as their
Looks like it.
ability
Yeah, right,
to
right.
draw water in the future is protected.
All right, so obviously next time we want a legend for what those numbers are that we have here, so we can reference them easily. The next thing is the Dedham, here's an 805, that's a different one.
It is, that's the
The Dedham
golf
Golf and
club.
Polo.
Yeah, that's recreation, 805, chapter 61B, recreation land.
Now note that Norfolk Golf Club doesn't have a high
would that be a
code,
different
has a
number?
low code.
So that means the Dedham Golf and Polo Club is protected, or they have a, how does that work?
No, it's not really protected, it's temporary protection, you know, the town has a right of first refusal if they wanna sell it or change the use. But, they get a tax break because it's classified as recreation land, but it's really not protected. It's
So
not
if
considered protected.
if they wanna sell it for homes or something, do they need to go through any procedure to reimburse the taxes that have been
Yes,
saved over the years?
exactly. Only for a limited, I think, 5 years or so, and then the town has to decide whether to exercise its right of first refusal or not.
But 380 Norfolk Golf Club is probably no
No.
protection at all?
That's a commercial classification. That's why they haven't, sought, maybe they have future plans and they don't wanna be, limited by that right of first refusal.
Okay, next is, we have Willett Pond, which also has 905, which is some sort of protection, but I'm not sure what.
Not permanent protection.
Oh, and the Ponca River
But
land holding.
that's,
That's-
they came
Oh,
to the
that's what that's in the
selectmen,
selectmen
right,
the other day.
right. It's the pond itself and the shores of the pond that are in Westwood.
All right, next
And
are all
then from there
unmarked.
down, all of 132 are all vacant parcels that are privately owned, that have no protection on them, but they're taxed as vacant parcels. In many cases, they're parcels that have an adjacent parcel with a house on it that are owned by the same people. So someone might have broken their land into two parcels, one their higher tax property with the house on it, and one their yard, with no structure on it. And they have it in a different tax category so that it's, their tax bills
So
are
these,
reduced.
so these are properties with the interest of the land trust. Because at one time, when they first got the land trust going, we went through the town and looked at parcels of land like this, especially the ones with large acres which were vacant, and so they were possibly lands that could be acquired and preserved.
There are additional ones on this, like go down High Ridge Homeowners Association.
Mhm.
There are others in the Cohasset Estates Homeowners Association. There are a bunch of properties that were required to be open space in
Okay,
developments, and so those are
so they're already.
protected by those
protected.
subdivisions, but they're not completely protected because the homeowners association could return to the planning board and ask for development.
And that depends on how the, since the subdivision was approved, and what conditions it was approved under.
Right. But no matter how it was approved, they can always request a
Yeah.
re-subdivision, so that, none of that is permanent.
No, come on, Matt.
But it's, given that we have a decent planning board at any given time, then that's really good protection. Just that one caveat that the planning board is,
No.
You wanna make that known, huh?
the planning board is still preserving the desires of the town to preserve land whenever they can. So these, that's mixed then, all these, that last,
That
Hey.
last one is all the 132 categories.
oh,
So
some of
it's all
them
vacant
are,
land, just vacant land. It's not owned by the town, it's not owned by one of the major landholders like Hale Reservation or either of the golf clubs. It's either held by a homeowners association or by private individuals, and it's just vacant land, but it's undeveloped land.
right, but there are other categories in there, and some of them must, what indicates whether there's a conservation restriction on these or not? Anything here?
I had, the tax, there's nothing in the tax assessor's records that indicate whether there's a conservation restriction.
Mhm.
That's why we asked them to list all the book and page listings for all the deeds. And when someone has the time to do that, they'll review the book and pages and go through the deeds and mark which ones are restricted and which ones are not.
Yeah.
Nora, can I make a request? The one parcel, Pignatelli, Millbrook, Hartford, 6 point something acres.
6.82.
What page you on?
One.
page.
I have advanced which
Okay.
It's map 19, lot 16.
Lot 12 is the Pignatelli.
Isn't it both of them?
I don't
Well,
think,
no,
well,
Pignatelli was .6. Trailer, who was a real estate person, donated the 6.5 acres.
Is that the one that has no name to it though then?
No, the poor guy came back here from Minnesota or Michigan to show his family the land that his dad donated. And we didn't have much of a listing on it. By the grace of God, I remember going by it on the school bus. There was a sign there, so Karen got another sign put up on the property. But Pignatelli's .6, and it's actually designated as trailer conservation area. And since the guy seemed to be a little sensitive about being named after his dad, I think we ought to call it the trailer, not the Pignatelli.
so Pignatelli is lot 12.
Hmm.
AP 19 lot 12 is Pignatelli Millbrook. And then the next one, lot 16, the 6-acre one, that does not have any name listed next to it in this record. So if that, is that one trailer?
Is that the trailer?
Okay, so it's the 6-acre one that's trailer?
Yeah, they call it 6.5.
So these are just sorted by
And is that
parcel number. So,
You spell trailer?
so that's just the next parcel number, so it could,
Traylor.
so it could have nothing to do with the previous one.
That's across the street from Millbrook, right? The sign that Bobby put up.
Yeah.
Wow, I get you.
I can't believe I remember that.
It's a good one.
I think so.
You're
So
not losing
Karen,
it. You're
when
No, I'm
you
losing.
get live on the map, just double check that that is the right lot for that one.
Okay.
I think that's near Haslam Pond, right? The one on
I don't
farmland.
know how big it is.
No, Haslam's behind, Haslam's.
Haslam's Farm and Fieldstone, right?
Oh, I thought it was the fourth one down from, on the first page.
I thought Haslam was the one who went skating on off Pond Street by,
No,
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 Boston,
it's
sorry.
corner farm and field.
Farm and Fieldstone, we just, the DPW restored it in the past
Okay.
year.
That's the 3 acre
Todd, what's the
parcel,
one
right?
down off of, between Pond and High?
Build the dam between Pond and High.
Yeah.
Perry Cross, huh?
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
yeah, that's it, you're right.
Yeah, the dam.
Isn't that bigger than 3 acres?
What's that?
Yeah, farm and field farm.
Bigger, what, the pond itself? It is now because the dam, it looks bigger, but no, it's probably pretty close to that.
Perry Kraus?
No, Haslam.
Haslam's listed as 4 acres and Perry Kraus is 2.
That's probably all of that, give or take.
I see all, on page 2, everything listed on the Providence Highway. Those are probably conservation lands, or?
There is some, Steve,
Those are-
by Lambert Plaza.
A lot of
At
that
the
is
O'Toole,
flood,
the O'Toole.
Oh,
flood
floodplain,
restricted
yeah.
property.
But I mean, it might be across the street also, the town acquired by eminent domain, the town meeting one time, the, well, it's formerly the Trolley property.
Mhm.
And again, that was supposed to be to preserve it as conservation land, so again, there must be a lot of these things.
And that's what
Yeah.
requires checking the deed to
Yeah.
see if it was actually deeded for conservation land or not. It's
The
only
trailer-
restricted if it was deeded that
The
way.
trailer is book 4847, page 694, July 6, 1973, from Joseph Taylor.
Did you see these Providence Island ones?
A lot of them are flood restricted lands, yes.
So I don't see anything 48 here at all.
I don't know if it was Corps of Engineers or if it was just the town acquired it to prevent development so that, you know, because they were concerned about flooding the area.
Okay.
I believe it's all town owned. I don't think the Corps of Engineers provided funding for it, but
No, was
Did
it
you guys have an easement?
on Providence Highway?
Yeah.
Yeah, so there was
Used to be a
a
sand.
citizen initiative petition. It went to town meeting and all that land was acquired just to keep it from being developed, and because it's wetlands and because it's alongside the brook, which brook that's flooded periodically and has caused problems for the neighborhood there.
so they were purchased as flood storage to prevent,
Yeah,
not to
flood
allow them to
storage
develop so
and,
that they
yeah,
store.
keep it from being developed.
Okay, the reason I asked is that they are shown as 900, and that's a US government category, but maybe that's why they had 900 designations by them.
Okay, so that, right, but again, the intention was, I believe, town meeting was to conserve it as floodplain.
Mhm.
So you would think that would be conservation protected land.
Or it could be DPW that would be the manager of the
Yeah.
flood control lane. I wouldn't
Where is
think
it?
they would,
On Providence Highway, between the railroad, let's see, from East Street down
Over
towards
that back of Foster Brothers there, that channel.
No, yeah, that channel, but it runs alongside Route 1, and it starts at East Street, and it goes down towards where you hit the first development.
several of these parcels are on the other
It's
side
like
of
a
the
strip,
street.
a little strip mall with the AAA is.
It's the book, it's off
Okay.
Cherry Street.
We've never,
There's that one.
I've never been in there.
Book.
The only thing we've ever maintained back there is that right next to the train, the railroad tracks of East Street Bridge, straight back to where Foster Brothers
Right.
used to be is.
Yeah, is that listed as conservation land?
That's
Oh, actually-
that's privately owned, that's part of Foster's land.
Oh, no, no, wait a minute, you're talking further upstream or downstream?
I'm talking right under, just under the bridge, if you ran the train
Yeah.
tracks all the way down to Everett Street.
Yeah.
That channel that runs right there, the drainage that runs in and goes through the Foster Brothers property.
Okay,
That's South Brook.
yeah. That's
Correct.
Southbridge, yeah.
We've maintained that in the past, and also the Algonquin gas.
Algonquin gas property,
They've come
so,
in the
That
past, this
Right.
was years ago that they came in and wiped it out too.
but I don't think that's a separate parcel. I think that
Yeah.
runs across the privately owned parcels. The town owns the piece that's right adjacent to the highway, to Route 1. The part that's between the AAA building and
It's
the,
all
Glacier,
over.
like by
Neighboring
Glacier,
houses.
by Wilson Way down in there,
Yes.
those two, right.
but once you get into Wilson Way, do you remember behind the Prime dealerships where they had to clean out the culvert? That's not on a town-owned parcel. That culvert is on private property.
Okay.
That was the sticky wicket that Tim had, because the state undersized it.
There was something years
They
ago.
undersized
That-
it. Nora, did I give you the book and page on Underwood?
Yeah, why don't you give it to me again, because I didn't get it. Underwood,
Is
4903, book and page 37.
And it was for conservation purposes by George Sable.
Okay,
The date
I'll
is
cross
January
that.
of 73.
All right, I'll cross that against the inventory that has the book and page numbers. So if anyone thinks of any parcel that they think might have been missed, just call me up and I'll look at it. What I'll do when I go over this again tomorrow to add these few things, I will send it, I'll send this document out to everyone, and if you want to go onto the maps online, you can actually call it up by the number on here to see if the parcel is what you thought it was. Or if you have any specific questions, just send them to me by email and I'll make sure. If you know the name of it, if you know the address, or if you know the plat and lot number, I'll make sure it gets listed.
And so this exercise is to identify all the properties, but we're also talking about other things, like coding it differently, so there's
Yes.
coding, there's coming up with some descriptions, and what does this span? What do
Well, I
we do?
think for me too, I mean, there's some that I think that are in there that we should ideally see if we get to a point where we can put conservation
Yeah.
restrictions on it.
Mm-hmm.
The Dedham Westwood Water District, 11.5 acre site, kind of comes to mind.
Yeah.
So that was what I thought.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they did a lot of them,
Right.
which I think were always intended to be conservation land, or that was the implication, and it hasn't been done. And there are others that we probably could find like that and say, okay, this should be conservation land.
Mm-hmm.
And are there impacts to tax revenues based on code changes and, and
Right,
the
so-
implications with that?
I believe all of the ones, except for the 130s and 132, which are just vacant land, all of the ones that begin with 9,
that's all
7, 8,
tax,
those
okay.
are all, they have tax implications.
But they're already not,
All the 900s are tax
Okay.
exempt, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, so all of the non-900s have some tax ramifications, so changing the non-900 to a 900, that would have an impact, okay?
Right.
Would it be helpful if I put these into the categories that we need for the final version of the plan before you go further with this? I could do that.
Let me make sure I have it as a complete listing, and then I'll send it to you
Okay,
in an email, and then you can do that. I just wanna make sure that I'm not missing any
Sure.
of the parcels
Yeah.
first.
so some of the columns here, like condition, I think everything looks like it's in good
Everything is,
condition.
everything is
That's great.
listed as good, until you give us a reason to think it isn't. So
Is that
I'm not
because there
aware of
isn't
any,
leaking gallons, orange
yes,
booze and stuff?
none of these are brownfield sites.
Right.
None of them
So they're
are
good
underwater that shouldn't be underwater, so they're all in good condition unless you note otherwise.
Okay.
None of them are trash thrown or have been torn up by bulldozers, so
But that
in
wouldn't-
good condition.
That wouldn't necessarily show up, though, if something like that had happened, because it wouldn't, it could be trash and bulldozed, but it wouldn't show up as a cleanup site.
Foster Brothers.
It would be a cleanup site if it was listed, for instance, the Foster property. We know that has
Right.
some contaminants in it. That would be listed, that's not,
But it just
A
might be
parcel is protected.
otherwise bad condition and trash buildup over the years, but that wouldn't be reflected here.
it wouldn't be unless we reflect it. That's our job in putting the chart together for the report, that if there are any of these properties that really needs work, we list them as not in good
Okay, so who made the decision that these are all good and
That's just the default.
that just the fall?
This is the starting
that's the
point for
starting
us to
point.
determine if any of them have problems, and then we need
Okay.
to.
if I can comment on that, I think conservation lands that are undeveloped and, just natural, are all gonna fall into good.
You're automatically good.
When they're, or excellent, even
Yeah.
they could be excellent. But when there's a parking lot, or the recreation parcels, if the equipment is older, that's when they would fall below good into fair or poor if it's in need of rehabilitation.
Like June Street Playground comes to mind, that had the equipment removed. It was in poor condition when it had deteriorating equipment. That's been removed, now it's just an open site. But I wouldn't say it's excellent because it doesn't have new equipment.
And where is that listed on here?
June Street, that is the second page, second to last one, June Street
Okay.
Playground. So it was a problem before, the problem was removed.
I guess that tennis court's not pretty good. But that's part of the Sheehan Fields, though. It's only a small part of the Sheehan Fields. That's true,
And we're gonna
though.
fix those, right?
No,
Both
the,
are projects on the list.
Yeah.
And so
We
when you
want
got to
fix
that,
both.
when
That
you get
old
to that,
tennis
you would
court
list it,
needs
that,
work.
that field's good,
Yeah.
former tennis court,
we wanna do something with
yeah,
it.
needs repair,
Not, well, it's more repurposing,
replacement or repurposing.
something.
So the next column is public access,
Yeah,
and we did mostly yeses here, surprisingly, only a few no's.
so
So
that,
where did that come from?
so that, again, that was the default. The no's are the parcels, the Dedham Westwood Water District does not allow public access. So
What
these
about
are not whether it's
privately owned?
accessible, the
Not the
privately owned
homeowner
ones,
association, but the ones you described as being part of someone's,
backyard,
Backyard.
those are all listed as not accessible.
okay.
But then there are some of these conservation ones where public access is permitted, but you might not be able to get to it.
Right, and so, and that's the,
Like where?
well, the Blue Hill Vista property, that's conservation land,
To the deed, it's a conservation,
but it's not really publicly accessible, it's pretty hard to get to. And its purpose is to provide a buffer between the commercial area and the residential area. So so if you were to do a management plan for that area, the management plan would be, leave it alone, no trails, just do like emergency kind of maintenance, pre-maintenance when necessary, if something happened, like some disease or something came through. You would have to do that, and that would probably be the extent of the management plan for that parcel.
what about the lands that have conservation restrictions on them? Do we need to capture that?
Yes,
Yes,
they need to be identified separately if there's a conservation, an official conservation
There's a
restriction.
few off Sandy Valley Road.
Yeah.
Sometimes when they do a new development, don't they put conservation in there, so
Yeah.
parts of it can't be developed after the fact?
right, there's a mandatory dedicated open space.
But again, some of them are true conservation restrictions, went through the process, went to the state, got
Right,
approval. Those are true conservation restrictions.
Mostly the newer ones.
And then the others are just, might be something that was put on the deed,
and those can
They can be
expire
and those
reversed,
can
after
expire,
30 years.
and typically they expire after 35 years,
30.
30 years,
unless renewed.
unless renewed, and we're not keeping track of that.
Oh, I don't know.
I've been 27 years on the planning board, and I know we had one at the beginning, so I think we've got 3 more years to renew. If I can remember where it was.
Who's here from Can I ask a question? Who's here from the land trust?
Right.
You must have data
Yeah, I just
on,
to double check with Karen, but some of these on that last page, I don't know if the codes 131 are, but the ones on, owned by, on Land Trust Summer Street, some of those owned by Duncan McFarland, I know have conservation restrictions.
So we need 2 things from the land trust. We need the original study the land trust did, looking for possible plots of land that could be, that need to be preserved and that the land trust was looking into as possible, as candidates for being acquired or protected in some way, having conservation restrictions put on them. And then the ones actually, that the Conservation Commission has actually, I mean, the land trust has actually done over the past number of years. Both of us would be really helpful here.
but the Concom had to sign off on those, think about the ones on Sandy Valley Road.
Yeah.
Not under the care and custody of the land trust, but private property owners put it into a special restriction. I
Right.
think the land trust people,
Correct, like there are some
Instrumental.
here listed by Duncan McFarland who privately owned by him but have a conservation.
no, I'm saying is there are others.
Yeah, there
besides
probably are, I would
Duncan.
have to check with, I'm new to land trust, so I'll have to check with Karen Manor.
Yeah, Karen would know.
Much more.
Yes. So the ones that got official conservation restrictions were approved, they were approved by the state, then the land trust is the, in perpetuity is the, what do you call it, the,
Older.
yeah, the holder of the conservation restriction. And, but it was also signed off by the selectmen and
So, and that's information that would not be in the tax assessor's online map because it wouldn't be a discrete parcel. It would be a restriction placed on a portion of the
Right.
existing
And
parcel. So that won't come up
in our
on this
GIS
list.
system, is that listed anywhere?
It's not.
So that's
No.
something that's a
No.
need that.
So
we
the
need
tax
to do.
assessors have the information and they use it when they assess the
Yeah.
tax on the property. So there might be a section in the online code that says restriction, but it doesn't say what the restriction is. You just have to pull up the deed and review it.
Okay, so that's the kind of thing that we need to get
We
on
need
our
the land trust
GIS,
to get us that
system.
information.
both from the, and then the other ones, when there's any kind of restriction, even just as a covenant, again, expires after 30 years, is now is be the time to try to get that also on our GIS system. Because if no one remembers them, then they're gone after those 30 years. So again, so the public access, everything was mostly yes, and we want to really have a category where it's really public access, yes, because it's conservation land, so technically it is, but practically speaking, it's not. There's some of them that,
There are some parcels, for instance, that are behind someone's house. They might have cut off their backyard and
Mhm.
donated that to the town, and it became a conservation property, but it's not, you can't get there without going through someone's yard, so it doesn't have an entrance.
so we need like a third public access, we need it's really a no, but it's a different kind of no. It's not that, it's not publicly owned, it's just you can't get there. It's strictly. And I don't know how you wanna say that, but.
Accessible.
Yeah, inaccessible, might be a good way, yeah.
You say we need it, I mean, we need it for clarity to make it more usable, or do we need it?
So we need to put, there are charts that the state requires us to fill out
Yeah.
in this plan, and one of the categories in the chart is it publicly accessible or not?
Got it, so this is a
So
yes.
it's
we
either
need it.
yes or no,
Yes.
or.
Can I
It's
But then
something
it's
we wanna
yes or
know, it's
no,
something
right?
we
It's
need.
not
Yeah.
it's not
But-
two different no's in this chart, it's one no. Doesn't
Right,
matter
yeah.
why.
We
it's
should,
just
we
no.
should distinguish it for our own purposes anyway.
For
I
some
mean,
of
for the
these-
state, it would be a no, but for our purposes, it'll be no because it's inaccessible.
Yeah,
But some
you
of these
might want-
parcels are really small. We're
Yeah.
talking incredibly small parcels. Do we really need to dedicate time to getting that deep? I guess I'd wanna know if it's a 10-acre parcel, is it publicly accessible? If it's a 1-acre
If
parcel,
it's a portion of
do
someone's
we really
backyard.
care?
You need to determine whether the state's question pertains to whether it's legally accessible or whether it's physically accessible.
Right.
There has to be some purpose for that question.
Yeah.
It's legally.
And it's one or the other.
Legally accessible.
Yeah.
What I would suggest is you put yes, but with an asterisk and, or a footnote, and
Right.
at the bottom say, but no, landlocked,
Yeah.
just landlocked would probably do it.
And who are we expecting is gonna drill down each of these parcels and do this?
Karen?
Yeah, together, we're,
I mean, I guess, is this what this
No,
committee is gonna do? I-
that's a staff function.
Oh, any
We're going
volunteers?
through that. We've taken
So we're gonna have staff go through these sheets?
parcel by parcel, we've
by
already,
parcel.
Yeah.
we've already done the first round, and then we'll
But
go
Because-
further. But
you
what
need-
we aren't going to be able to do is review every deed to find out what the restrictions are, when they were placed, and how long until they expire.
And the
That's
state,
not something that we'll be doing as
But
part
to
of
the
answer
this.
state
John's
requires
question.
that level of detail for our plan?
They do, they require all town-owned parcels to be listed on this chart, and then you
Yeah.
have to categorize them.
Okay.
So if it's town-owned, it has to be on there. All the private property doesn't have to be on there unless you're listing it as open space property.
But it's, I guess what we have this huge brain power at the table here, and we're trying to get really detailed on specific tasks that it sounds like staff are gonna perform.
Right.
So what is the role of this whole table full of people?
For the point of right now, since I can't walk you through,
Yeah,
it's just, if something comes to mind that
Okay.
you know that you don't think I've captured, let me know, and I'll
Okay.
make sure I've captured it. That's it. So I will
Okay.
send this out, and you can look at it online, call up the pictures.
you're making me
That
really
helps you.
nervous. I thought we were all gonna be going to all these
No.
addresses.
No, I'm not doing that.
No, just, I was just gonna say, just you
If
do
we
it.
had it on
Get to
the,
find out
on
where
the
most of the work.
screen,
Then I
it would have been a lot
right.
easier and we could run through it, but at this point,
Yeah.
it's much more difficult. And since we're not sure which some of these even are, then it's,
Right, so send me questions and I'll make sure it's listed. If you think of an area that you think we might have missed, just let me know and I'll make sure it's
Yeah.
listed. So we should probably move on into the next, the
Second
survey.
item.
Yes.
It's already after 8.
okay. Oh, so the detailed survey results. Now,
start at 7, wasn't it?
has everyone read through the detailed survey? I did.
Right, that was sent out by email after the last meeting.
$300. 600 of them?
This one.
This one, okay. So,
So before we start going through this, I do want to say that I don't want us to publicly review the details of the survey because I want the visioning session to have people who have a fresh mind and to come into that with open-minded ideas and not to be pigeonholed based on the results of the survey. So I don't think we should be going through question by question, but if there's anything that you encountered when you were reviewing the results that you want to question, you want to look at something that you think we need to drill down on more than the survey already did, then I think that's what we should be discussing.
Oh,
No.
so my question was, because you went through in main conclusions, but we didn't have any numbers with it. This is a copy of the,
Yep.
so everyone can look at it, of the summary. As I went through there, it was striking like how many people said we needed an ice skating rink, for instance. Or how many people said,
It's funny how that happens.
yeah, and, how many times did you do survey?
Maybe twice.
So,
I mean, there were emails going around, not
Yeah,
that I
all
did.
these
Yeah.
All these
organizations
sports were saying,
sending
you
it out.
know,
Oh,
we
I got
gotta
it
really?
respond, we
several
usually respond.
yeah.
Yeah.
Hockey people just did it fast.
Oh, so also, there may be a bias in there, but
Well,
nevertheless,
most come to the
it
visioning
would be nice
session.
if we could get a more detailed, for instance, a list of questions and how many responded to that. We don't need every little thing, but how many people said out of the 600 respondents, we need a hockey rink? How many said we need, we don't have enough regulation
How
size
many or the percentage?
basket?
Because we have 39%.
Oh, you do have?
Yep, it's in the summary.
Okay.
So that would be under number 5, I think is the question you're looking at. Check up to 5 items below that you feel should be a priority in Westwood in the next 5 years.
Yeah,
The top 5 items that should be a priority were identified as an ice hockey rink, 39% of total responses, trails, 37%, a community center, 31%, a dog park, 29%, and outdoor swimming facilities, 26%. Those were the top,
okay.
yeah, those are the top.
So, but that was a specific question, right? It wasn't,
Yeah, we did that for every
so,
question.
so you,
It's
so
not-
should we
it's not
assume
going
then
in
that
order right
if you
now.
go down
It's
all the
sorted
comments
alphabetically.
and you added them up, you would,
But here's the.
and that number,
Yeah.
percentage of the whole would be about the same? Considering,
What do
that-
you mean?
assuming that people were consistent?
Well, we asked them to pick 5, so it won't add up to 100. Some people skipped some questions,
Mhm.
so you can't always.
Okay, but these were
yeah.
ones you laid out in advance, right?
These were the questions in the survey, and we looked at the detailed results and figured out what.
In other words, you're wondering if they
Comments,
were
yeah.
spontaneously
Right,
suggesting a hockey
so
rink
someone
versus
could,
checking it off on a list.
This
What
particular
area
one was
should
Yeah.
checking it
or-
off,
looking up.
yeah.
Oh, so are there other things in there that, weren't on your list that people
I don't
might have
know.
commented on in the 600?
There was an opportunity for an
Comments.
open response.
Yeah, there's a few open questions, yeah.
And was there anything predominant, or was everything, in that question, did you really capture everything? Because did you know in advance to ask the question?
Yeah, the staff helped us figure out what the multiple choice should be, but we did the open as well. One open was number 6, what areas in Westwood should be acquired or restored for the future use of town residents for recreation or conservation purposes. And then this is just a list of some of the things that people,
Were there any items that really stood out that a lot of people said? Like Westwood Lodge or?
Yeah, I saw that.
I saw that a bunch of
yep,
times.
that's in there too,
Yeah.
yeah.
So where do you have that, oh, okay,
That's number
that's number 6.
Someone wants an outdoor pool site at the Westwood Lodge.
We're looking at the survey.
But I will, for the
We
staff
should buy
though,
the building.
there was a theme I thought in a lot of the commentary about how clean and in good shape the facilities
Yeah.
were.
Yeah.
I think that was good. I think that
Did we,
was
did we capture that
spontaneous.
percentage?
The
Or how many
fields
people said it
themselves
was
or the
clean,
field
and how many
is
people
overall?
said it was good but uneven, and how many people
Yeah, we
said it
ranked
wasn't
it.
clean?
We said, how would you evaluate the overall, this is question 2, the overall quality of the recreational facilities found in Westwood? About 63% of respondents marked the overall quality of Westwood's recreational facilities is very good or excellent. 30% marked the quality is good. 7% marked the quality was fair. When asked to explain their answer, participants cited the good condition and maintenance of the fields in the town, the cleanliness of open spaces, and parking availability. Concerns listed included the state of the tot lot playground, the lack of restroom availability in some public spaces, the poor state of some of the grass fields, the absence of tennis courts, and the age and upkeep of some of the indoor gyms. Some comments stated they would like to see improved or expanded recreation areas in town.
The outdoor field's kind of surprising, you know.
So,
Grass fields.
yeah, so something that might not have
I
been
don't think
captured
we
that I
have
saw
one
was,
grass field that is
some people said,
below
I know.
A plus
But it was very
material,
small
or-
percentage that
Yeah.
even said they were fair.
Yeah.
And of
Yeah,
that,
very
maybe only a
small.
few
Yeah.
said.
Only
Yeah.
7% said fair.
Someone probably was on a field before it was,
Yeah.
you know,
Cause I feel like.
snow was still
The
there.
restroom facility comments.
That's fair.
Yeah.
And the old
No.
gyms.
The old
I
gyms.
mean,
Yeah.
like the middle school
House
gym,
Thurston.
Thurston Old
yeah.
Gym.
Thurston Old.
Yeah.
You shouldn't be playing sports in there.
No, that was horrible.
See when the kids bounce the ball at Hamlin, it's like,
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Does it
Hamlin
come
is,
back up?
those are the little kid, the types that you, with hockey, when they play basketball, that's where they are, that's bad too.
so some people said, most of the fields are good, but there were a couple that were not. And is that maybe an item that's not
I
captured
mean, that
so
could have been
far?
somebody that saw them a couple
The only
years ago
two
too,
fields
like
that I can think of
Deerfield
off the
was
top of my
redeveloped.
head as far as
Right.
turf that needed improvement, we've addressed, we just put irrigation
Thurston.
in. Not Thurston, it's the School Street Playground, which we've just replaced all the fencing and put irrigation in there,
oh, right.
and the Hanlon School. And we just replaced all the fencing with vinyl fencing there and put irrigation in. The only other fencing issue we're addressing, hopefully if it ever stops snowing.
Thurston
That's a shame.
baseball field is.
The third, and we just did that over,
Yeah, but I
It's-
wouldn't be surprised if that,
right?
Mm.
But that
Something
even came
Charlie-
I
out,
had forgotten about the
That's really
Hamlin
bad.
too.
the Thurston baseball just was.
it's new, but it was lately,
it
yeah,
was,
right?
yeah.
Right. People may not have seen
They
it.
might
Oh,
not know it.
They
So-
might
so-
not have been
So they
there.
may have been complaining about things they haven't seen in a
Right,
while.
because their
Yeah.
season, they are, yeah. It was in bad shape during the
Yeah.
baseball season,
Right.
so
Yeah, yeah.
that's the last time we would have experienced it.
And people, I mean, also, I mean, going to these other towns where they have the mega complexes. and-
Right,
I mean, everyone's perception of good and, you know, is different, right?
yeah.
So,
Yeah, I mean, when we went to the new Medfield facility, we went for baseball this summer, everybody was
Unbelievable.
wowed by it.
Oh,
And
yeah.
then we would bring people from surrounding towns to the Martha Jones, and they were so impressed, right? So
Yeah.
it's all what,
they call it-
Relative.
what you're experiencing at home, right?
Yeah, I get more of the latter. People were impressed with the fact that we get the soccer fields open for
Yeah.
everybody else.
But even look at Deerfield too, I think that's the hidden gem right now, as far as fields, overall field use and track and softball capability and everything that you could do with the Deerfield field now.
Oh,
is-
yeah.
That
it's in
was
good shape.
one that was.
But the soccer field at the Downey is great,
Yeah,
yeah, for a moment.
I'm gonna start working at Fenway.
The weather's been so good for the last couple of years.
Right.
I think
Yeah.
any complaints have to be more than a couple of years old.
Yeah.
That's what-
Yeah, although, I mean, you said the School Street Playground field, I had forgotten about that.
Yeah.
That was pretty beaten up.
That was, it
So,
was in terrible condition.
Recently.
Yeah, I got questioned why I was investing money there, but initially, it's your son or daughter's first
First
game they're ever
T-ball.
gonna play.
T-ball,
So, it'll be a hot spot this year, it'll be nice down there. There in the Hamlin will be much improved.
Yeah, so and this went out to everybody, right? So it could be people whose kids have even aged out of these fields and
Right.
they're
Yeah.
remembering them from 2 years ago. And just answering the question because it's there.
so in terms of response rate, how would you rate our response rate to others?
So more than twice the response rate to, for instance, the library survey that went
Oh, good.
out, and they were very happy with the response that they got. They were in the 300s, so
Okay.
we did much better than that. I think it's a fairly good result from just a email blast survey. It doesn't have children responding. That's the one area we talked about, whether we could get the schools to submit it in their wellness classes and ask at least the middle school and high school students to get their thoughts on it. So
Mhm.
we're in the process of trying to get that.
No, I spoke to Sean at the site council meeting earlier this week, and he's open to whatever we want to
Terrific.
do.
Yep.
we should come to it with a specific ask.
We couldn't just send it out via their school emails, huh?
Yeah.
That's a possibility, but they're less likely to fill it out that way. Whereas if it's a exercise at the beginning of the wellness class, a 5-minute exercise, because the survey is so short, it really only takes 5 minutes. If the teachers are willing to do that, I think we'd have a much better response rate.
Give them no homework for a night if they fill it out, they'll get 100%.
I think they're smart enough to know we'd never know if they filled it out or not.
No, it has to prove it, we'd have to have their email address. You get passed to turn in for no homework.
So in other words, so the question is, do these 4 pages here really capture everything that we saw in the individual responses? And it sounds like it does.
And these are the, you know, the launching to the visioning session, right?
They
So
are.
this is more of a getting our ideas and getting our arms around some things. You put all this aside, the visioning session will really kind of frame it, right?
Right, and there are 2 different data sources, one
Yeah.
from the survey, and they may not be the same people, many of them may be, but others might be different. And then we collect the information from the visioning session, where you can drill down in much more detail and actually have conversations about people's thoughts on.
So when are the communications going out about the visioning session? I know I'm gonna post something on Facebook, but I don't wanna post it too early and people forget about it. When are the mass
It'll be
emails going out?
posted on our website, it'll be, there was a story in the local paper the week before Christmas saying, it must have been Christmas week, saying that it was on the 18th, we've changed the date to the 1st now, so we'll get
Yeah.
another story out in the local paper saying that. The Hometown Weekly is going to run it the same week. So you don't wanna do it too early, because people
Yeah,
forget
yeah,
about it.
exactly.
So I think it'll probably
Do
be
like
the
a
week
week
after
before.
next. Not this
Everyone's
Friday,
lying.
probably
Will
the
we
next
do it
Friday.
again? Like, will it come out in the paper, like, will
be
recurring
in
every
the-
week until the session, or?
We can ask them to put it on the cover page, just in the
Yeah, the
on the
week of,
left-hand
it should be
side.
in the cover, or the,
Yep.
you know, the Thursday
things
before,
to
whatever.
do this week, whatever they have. We can ask for that.
And
It'll
we-
also be in the district bulletin the next 3 Wednesdays.
Oh, that's good.
Where
All
are
right,
we
so
doing it?
I think it's important to emphasize,
First.
We're
especially
doing
for
it
anyone's
at
watching
Thurston
on
Middle School.
television, that the date has been changed.
Mm.
It is now February 1st,
Mhm.
and it's at what time?
Thurston Middle School
Thurston Middle
cafeteria,
School,
7 p.m.
7 o'clock. So that's a big change. It's no longer the date that we had in January, because I know the word had gone out and already people had. So that's important for everyone to note that change, February 1st.
And the reason for the change, the basketball, the high school basketball boosters club had an event scheduled for that night, and we didn't want to
Yes.
disenfranchise the entire basketball community.
What time is it again?
7 o'clock. 7,
And so what's our role? Were we sharing ideas or just taking it in, or both? I
Do
mean,
you
could
want
we-
me to go through
We
the
representing
design?
our commissions and saying this is what we,
Yeah,
think we need?
I worked up a design, if you want me to go through it, I'm happy to do
Sure,
that.
that'd be great.
So it's this color sheet here, just a 1-pager. It has a bunch of times on it, it says February 1 something. Westwood OSRP Community Workshop Designs, everybody have that?
Any others around?
Oh, these are extras right here. So Gino and I met a little while ago, I think it was last week sometime, and came up with this design to propose to you tonight. And so we had talked about starting at 7 o'clock. And just in general, the overall design would be to break out into small group discussions. Start off going through, registering and looking at some information boards. I'll talk about the details in a second. We'll give them an overview and a presentation about one subject. We can start with recreation or open space. In this outline, I started with open space. Break the night up really into 2 parts. So one part we talk about open space conservation, and the other part we talk about recreation. And each part we have a presentation related to the key findings in those 2 areas. And then we have them in small groups sitting in tables already. And we'll give them an exercise, a discussion exercise, that I'll talk about the details of what questions we want to ask, what materials we'll have available. But the idea is that folks in groups of 5 to 8 people would be talking with each of you. So you would be we'd have at least one of you at every table. It depends on how many people come. I don't think we'll need only one of you at each table, you probably pair up. But if you get really, overwhelmed with folks, then we would have one of you at each table. That would be our fallback position. And you would be running your small group through the questions that we'll give you. And then at
And
the
take
end of...
notes?
No, so we would like to ask either a member of the public, or some communities can get high school students to come in as part of their community service work to take notes. So that's something I wanted to throw out. One of my other clients is doing that now. But you would ask for a clerk at your table. I'm a strong believer that the table facilitator shouldn't be the note taker, because it's very difficult to pay attention to the discussion and the dynamics and making sure everybody's getting a turn to speak if you're also taking notes. And then at the end of the night, we would, reconvene and I would facilitate a very kind of strict way of hearing small report outs from each of you. And so I'd want you folks, if there's two of you at a table, you'd choose who would do the report out. And it would not be a full report out of every single thing you talked about. It wouldn't even be a full report out on both sections necessarily. I'm gonna pick and choose and get a sampling. You'll see that I've given 15 minutes to report. I think I gave 15 minutes to report outs. So that's a quick kind of, give me 2 minutes on what do you think is the highest priorities in this particular category. I'd focus on one question for each table. So that's sort of the general layout. Now let me just get into the specifics so you understand a little bit more what we were thinking. And then I'm happy to revise, amend if you think we should go in a different direction or ask different questions or have a different layout. We wanted to propose something to you so you had something to really chew on. But we're not necessarily wed to this. Just because it's in color and on my stationery doesn't mean we can't do it. So we would have a staff person from our office sitting at a table when folks entered the room, and she would have name tags pre-prepared and folks pre-registered. Anybody that walked in would get a new name tag and we'd record their name, and they'd get an agenda. And then we would have, you can see the next section is information boards. And so we would print out a poster board of the project scope and schedule. And we would have one or possibly more maps. We have to see what mapping is going to be available by February 1st, but we would have some hard copy maps clipped up on poster boards as well. And then Gino and I and members of the committee and town staff would be sort of around that area, mingling with folks as they walked in and offering to talk about the project, who you are, you're a member of the committee, I'm a consultant, just sort of chatting with people as they walked in. We have a built-in 15 minutes for this. And we would direct people to look at these maps, kind of point out so they could help read it, like this is what we think are all the conservation areas. And these are what we think are the environmental constraints in the community. These are what we think, based on our inventory, are the unprotected open space lands, or the lands in temporary protection under Chapter 61. And the important thing about that first 15 minutes is we're not ignoring people. We're all interacting with the folks walking in. You'll all have name tags that will identify you as a committee member or staff person or consultant. So that, and then we'll have one participation, or we can have one participation board. It would be kind of a generic map of the town, and we have all these little pins. Folks just put where they live in town. It's a way for them to get used to looking at the maps by finding their home. But it's also a way for us to see if we're getting a good representation of the community. Maybe we're only getting people who live near that school. I know that's unlikely, but it's a way for us to just confirm, are we missing any areas of the community? And then at 7:15, and I'm very precise about that, it'll be 7:15 on the dot. We'll start the presentation, and we would want someone, either town staff or the chairman of the committee, or you pick who it is, but somebody would open up the night, welcome people there, and it shouldn't be the consultants, it should be a member of your community who is in a leadership role involving this project. And so you would welcome folks, you tell them why you're doing this now, you tell them who the committee is and have everybody kind of raise their hand, or even do a quick introduction. And then you would introduce us. and Gino and I would break up the presentation and we'd go over who are we, why have we, why are we here doing this for you? What is the project scope and schedule, which they'll have seen on the board, but we'll just reiterate it very quickly. And then I can do some digital polling. I have the little software with the little pad. Do you use those for town meeting? Some communities do.
That's a
Oh.
question.
Okay.
We
Can
tried.
I ask you a question?
Of course.
Have you done in other communities this type of agenda?
Yeah.
And you've gotten a robust turnout and people stay through this whole?
Well, the turnout depends on your outreach. So sometimes we'll get 15 people, other times we'll get hundreds of people.
Yeah, that's I'm afraid of, that we'll be more on the 15.
Yeah, this is,
You're
No,
not,
I think
okay.
You'll be surprised if we've
I
done these
would
and we've got big turnouts.
I'd be happy to be wrong.
I know, but I don't see people staying on Thursday night for 2.5 hours.
Well, they leave at 9, we stay for the extra half, but yeah.
Okay.
But yeah,
I'm
it's
just,
still
I'm
2
happy to
hours.
hear that.
Well, the
People
planning
usually
board has
stay,
no
yeah.
trouble getting people to come out on a weeknight
There
and
were
stay
like
for
30
hours and
people,
hours,
there's only
Yeah.
tennis courts, so,
Okay.
right?
We've had planning
Were
board
there like
meetings go to
30 people?
11
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
actually,
after.
there were
and-
a decent number of people for tennis courts.
And that was
you're right.
just
That
tennis
was just
courts.
tennis, that was just
But
tennis
now
court.
they-
The
Well,
people who come will
they
be
no
people
choice.
who have
Yeah, I mean, we had a few
particular
sites
interest
listed
in
on
either
the postcards that
recreational
went
or
out for that.
Okay.
And it's also very interactive, so people don't even realize how much time has gone by, because it's not us talking. You'll see, we're talking fairly small amount.
Should we just tell them it's at 7, or don't tell them it's 7 to 9?
It's, communities do different things, and I've had this debate with folks before, and I could see it either way. Some people feel like just tell them it starts at 7, don't give them any indication of how long. Others say, we want to be upfront and tell people it's a 2.5 hour meeting. If people need to leave, they need to leave.
Yeah, but you get a meeting like this where feedback is welcomed, you'll be surprised at how fast 2 hours goes by.
Yeah.
And you're sitting there, you're like, oh my god, it's 9:30, shut
I
it
do
down.
think we announced at the beginning of the meeting that we
I
expected
heard
to go
she's
till
running a
9,
tight schedule.
Yeah.
and we
And
make
they'll
it
have
clear
our
to people
agenda.
if they need to leave
Yeah.
early.
Yeah.
But could we
Yeah,
flip
go ahead.
it so that recreation's first?
It doesn't matter to me, yeah,
Okay,
I just,
think there'll be people who
did it
come
in any order.
specifically.
There will be a lot of groups that
Yeah.
get people there.
Yeah, that's it.
But
I mean,
hate to
unless-
think people will be leaving
wanna keep
simply
people.
because.
you could
they
do
can't
the
go one and not the
opposite.
other.
If you think most people will care about recreation, you could have them talk about open space first, and then they stay. Because you do want input on open space priorities.
I really think if people come and just for
It's just like
recreation,
town meeting.
we want
I love
them to get
this
them interested
discussion
in
now.
open space. So I'm just saying that because I'm interested in open space.
But it's true, you don't want everyone leaving.
No, I don't think that will happen. We've had these before, and we've had good attendance, and people have stayed right on through, because they do get interesting, and people do get involved, and they stay.
Yeah.
But Steve, that was on a Saturday.
That was a
It's a
Saturday.
lot
yeah.
easier for families with kids on a Saturday.
Yeah, I think later
True.
in the night becomes more difficult.
Of course, yeah.
Well, do you want to start earlier?
think after 9 is tough.
I
Well,
don't
you
know,
lose
we can
the people
start
that
early,
work.
no. So I think
What time do people get back from downtown here?
probably 7.
Yeah.
Yep.
I don't think
So
we
they'll
go
come
any
right
earlier
from the
than
train?
that. They'll
I-
come straight.
I guess.
So just getting here tonight was still rush hour traffic.
Yeah, I know, I was a little
Yeah.
tough, yeah.
We've already broadly broadcast this time.
Right,
Yeah.
and
Yeah, I don't think you'll get
this is
people
a time
back
people are
home from
used to
Boston
coming to
much
meetings.
before
If
that.
we had discussed having it on a Saturday, we will get less of a turnout, especially on the recreation and on Saturdays. There are just too many conflicts,
Mhm.
especially among families who
Mhm.
are interested in recreation. They have their recreation activities
Mhm.
on Saturdays, so the evening is probably the best time.
So one thing we could do if you wanted to shorten it is to skip the report outs and the wrap up at the end. And we can basically end with them closing their small group discussion, which goes to 9:05. Thank them for coming, say we want to respect your time, we're going to write up the reports, and if you want to see them, go on the website.
I assumed they were leaving, it was just the moderator and the
No.
clerk this
No,
time.
people
Actually,
like to
exercise starts
stay-
at 9:20.
People like to stay and
Ah.
hear you represent what they talked about. Because
Oh.
they'll only have known what their 5 to 8 people at their table talked about. They want to know what all the other tables talked
Okay.
about. So they want to hear what your report outs are.
You can
And
give them
they
the
can
option
hear-
to leave or stay for
Well,
a
yeah,
while.
Well,
leave
I
if they
can't
want to
make them
anyway.
prisoners
Yeah.
anyway, so they always
Yeah,
have
yeah,
the
yeah,
option
yeah.
to leave.
But you could suggest, we're gonna
You give them the
wrap up
option,
this
let 'em go.
round table discussion at 9:05, then we're gonna, or 9 o'clock, whatever time it is. Then we're gonna do the report, wrap up, report
If
out
they wanna
questions.
leave-
You you may wanna stay for them, you may not.
If they wanna leave, they wanna leave. I'm not gonna encourage them to leave, cause I
Yeah.
actually want them to stay.
Okay.
If you give them the option, we'll go.
Yes.
Yeah, so as long as we
They can still leave, yeah.
stick to the schedule
It is,
and
it's just
don't
gonna be
fall
one night,
behind.
like work the next
No,
day.
I'm very precise with the
then-
schedule.
Yeah,
Yep.
then we won't have any problems.
We'll whistle.
So let's just go through the details. So we did the entry, when they come in, what's gonna happen with the boards and the interactive map. And then we were in the middle of going through what we're gonna present. And so the first 5 minutes will be whomever you choose to do the welcome and introductions. And then we'll do some digital polling, and that's where we got sidetracked. So we'll do some digital polling just to find out who's here, what's your age, how long have you been in
Do it on the
town.
phones? Well, how do you
No,
do it?
I have software with the polling devices that I purchased.
Oh, okay.
So I have enough for 75 people. If we think we'll get more, I can rent them. But I just need to know a week in advance.
I heard you say there's gonna be pre-registration for this.
Yeah, we
Okay.
made an
Yeah.
Eventbrite.
But it's not mandatory.
It's not mandatory,
No.
and I wouldn't expect it to be thorough. I think a lot of people will not pre-register.
So, again, we have an audience, a TV audience now. How do they pre-register?
So that'll be in the newspaper announcement, and it'll be on our website.
Yeah, and I created an Eventbrite link that I can share with you to put in your publications. But you just go into the link and you say you're coming, and that's it. It's, obviously free, and we say on the description, it's, we encourage you to pre-register because it helps us figure out how much food, how many copies, so we're not wasting a lot of paper, we're not bringing enough. And it helps us do things like, do we need to rent more polling devices? But it's obviously an open public meeting. Any member of the public can just come in and they don't have to pre-register, so we say that right on there.
Can we have can the town do a robocall telephone polling about this, or is that an use of? Okay.
It depends on how important it is, so
Yeah.
we can discuss it.
That's what they say,
Yeah.
then I get.
Yeah.
So
I
the
know.
problem with
Town
overusing the
meeting.
robocalls is they become
Gay
white
Street.
noise. So, public safety people tell you to really limit them. So
Yeah.
we can talk about it, but
Yeah.
I
we get a
think
million requests for the robocalls.
One robocall,
Yeah,
but
you have to.
a day or so before, or 2 days before, maybe.
It would be
Yeah, that's what I was
it
thinking.
would be
the
no
day-
more than one day
The
before.
day
One
before,
day
do a
Right.
robocall.
So it'd be on the Wednesday night.
Like election.
Right.
Like
If it ever
the
stops
day
snowing, we don't have to have DPW use it, right? We're
Or
killing
freezing
it.
if it ever, if today's temperature could last.
I think the best way to get the word out is the same way we got the survey out.
Right.
Through all the sports groups, through the school bulletin, through our private email list. That's the best way that you reach
And
people.
Facebook.
Is there a town Facebook page or next door
There
page?
is, there is,
Don't-
yep,
don't-
and that will be on that, it'll be on the recreation
And I'll do the
Facebook
Westwood
page as
bulletin.
well.
And I think did I hand out the outreach list to you all last time? I thought I did. So we have ideas on it, including the Facebook page. You're welcome to use that as a guide if you'd like. You don't have to do everything, they're just our suggestions. But we had on the back a sheet to sign up for different elements of that, and I think you had talked about it a little bit, but
Mhm,
maybe
we
hadn't
did.
gotten that far
Some
yet.
people volunteered,
Yep.
Mike, you're gonna do the
With the John
Westwood
Cummings,
Media
yeah.
Center, a couple of people talked about letters to the editor.
I volunteered to only do the Westwood Bulletin
Right.
and yard sale Facebook
Right.
post.
Jen, can I ask a question? I'm looking at the rec presentation, 20 minutes, which sounds like, can we make the others 20 minutes?
Okay, let me explain that. So the first one,
Why
so there
can't we
are,
make them 20 minutes?
let me show you why.
Okay.
There are two presentations. The first one at 7:15 includes the welcome and the project overview and the digital polling. And that takes a little bit of time. Then we get to talking about open space towards the end of that. The second presentation, recreation, I went back and forth on can I get it down to 15 minutes? And I opted to keep it at 20 because I wasn't sure of the content yet. It's possible I could slim that down to 15 minutes, but I wanted to be conservative and say it's gonna be 20. But that doesn't include 10 minutes of the intro, the digital polling takes a few minutes, the welcome and the introductions of all of you guys, and then going over the project scope and schedule. So that's what the extra 10 minutes in the 7:15 is.
Do we think we need 30 minutes for discussion on open space if we think most people are there for recreation?
Right.
I think this could, I'm sorry. I would work it differently. People want to go home. I'm happy they're there. I would cut it down to 20 minutes on each thing. I really would.
Yeah,
Rather than stand around it for 30 minutes, John, well, we gotta wait, cause Steve said we can't.
No, I
Well,
agree with you.
no.
I-
Yeah.
If
So
we
you
see,
know-
if we see that the discussions
Yeah.
are ending up and the people are wanting each discussion can signal you that they're done,
Yeah,
then
when
you
the
can do it
groups are
earlier.
done, I ask them to raise their hands. But one way we could reduce this time is to take out the first part. We could go right into we could skip the maps and the participation map in the beginning and the information boards. We could go right into, not giving people name tags. That saves time. They just walk in. You could pass around a sign-in sheet. Sometimes you lose signatures that way, but you can do it that way. And we could start the presentation right at 7, rather than having the initial piece built in.
Well, I think
So
the
that
maps,
would be a way of
maps were
getting-
well received last time.
That would be a way of getting 15 minutes out of this agenda.
I would actually, I think if we
Yeah.
put a 6:45 registration
You don't have to have people.
Yeah.
and have people just show up at 7, we could
That's a
do,
good idea.
we could do both.
The maps could be out,
Yep.
Yeah.
just be open
And it
registration.
was just, because if
Yeah, I
you're
like
if you're
that
there,
idea.
you're there, if you're not,
In any environment where you do a small group discussion, you have 20 minutes,
Yeah, 30
people are
is
gonna
too
start
long.
talking about what's going on in town,
Yeah.
Yeah.
the upcoming sock season, it's just too much, you have
Yeah.
to make that tighter. Because
Just
they're not gonna
go-
signal that they're done, because they're having a great conversation with their
Right.
neighbor
Yeah, and they're
about what's
sitting with
going
their
on in
friends
school.
too.
Well,
They're sitting with
I
their
think-
They're
friends.
not sitting.
30 minutes is just, it's
Yeah.
too unstructured.
So
Not
let
a
me
structure.
talk about the structure a little bit. I haven't gotten to that part of
Oh, there are
the
questions.
evening yet. Yeah. So what I've done in small group discussions is I'm very rigid about it. I give them an initial sheet with a few questions. And the questions we were thinking of is in bullet 1. We'll give them an overview in the presentation. If you look, actually, let me back up because we didn't finish the presentation. So if you look at what the content is for the 7:15 presentation, the key findings would be about open space resources and needs. We talked to them about the highlights of the open space inventory. We do not have to talk about the survey results if you don't want to. I heard Nora say that we didn't want to.
Right, I don't want to
bias them?
prejudice.
So we can just say that there was a survey and we're happy to share results at a later time, but skip that part. Then we'd like to review the open space goals from the 2000 plan so they can see what the town said 18 years ago. And then we'd like to talk with town staff next week sometime. Gino and I were gonna come in and talk with town staff to really understand what has changed since the 2000 open space plan. What of these goals do we think are still relevant? What have been achieved? Let's go through the action plan and go line by line and try to figure out what's been done. And we would present a summary of that in the presentation so that folks know how much you've done, because I imagine you've actually done quite a lot of it. And then we want to talk about, then I would get them into their discussion, and I would talk about, this is what we're expecting of you. We're breaking it out into 2 parts. Each part will be 15 minutes. And if you have 8 people talking for 15 minutes, that's only a couple minutes per person, so that goes very
I'm sorry, I don't
fast.
mean to interrupt.
Yep.
Is there any way that you could limit the time that you talked about the past, like the 2000? Because I think anybody coming there doesn't really want to focus on the past, they want to see what
I'm
are we here for?
envisioning it's like a
Like,
slide or 2.
Yeah.
And I think this is where we were the last time we did the plan. This is what you said was important. These are all the things that the town has been really good at accomplishing. It's always good to pat yourself on the back a little bit.
Yeah.
And then we say, part of the exercise we're going to do tonight is looking at these old goals and trying to figure out, are these still relevant? Are we
Right.
still working toward these? Are there other things that we want to add that we weren't considering as important in 2000? Or maybe something has changed. Maybe there's an element of sustainability or other things that you want to bring into this plan that you weren't thinking of 18 years ago. So that's the way I would present it. I don't think any of you have seen me present, but I'm very succinct and I get to the point, and I won't have long, boring slides that detail, like, they will not be handed this list. We'll give them a map just showing, this is the big picture here. But we need to get them to have some level of understanding, especially if a lot of people in the room are focused on recreation. We want them to really understand open space conservation and natural resources and the importance of protection. But we also want them to understand what the town's already done. And I don't think they can have the discussion if they don't understand that.
It's great to put down what got accomplished. Will you also cover anything that maybe wasn't accomplished and maybe any roadblocks they ran into?
Maybe, I want to find out what that is
Okay,
first.
okay.
So I think, yeah, I think it's very helpful. It gives people a sense of, where they're going with this and just not coming in cold. So I think this is very important. Because back then, we thought, the town needs more recreational fields everywhere. And that didn't happen because we went to artificial turf. And that made a very big difference. So that was a big change.
Right, and that's great to point
Yeah,
out.
people
Just
hear
heads
that.
on that maybe, and just show this is
Yeah.
what
So,
we're
so
thinking, this is what
saying
we
something
got.
briefly like that gives people their perspective
Yeah.
and they, so the discussion, they wouldn't know where the discussion begins.
Exactly. We need to give them something to chew on in the presentation. Okay, so the presentation, the first open space presentation would be broken into two areas. The first bullet is going over those goals. I like to give people a place to start. The goals are probably still relevant. If you look at them, and I gave you a copy of them, I retyped them. They were on 2 different pages in the document. They're a little repetitive, but on page 43 there were 4 goals, and on page 56 there were 10. I viewed the page 43 as kind of more overall, because they're sort of repeated but in more detail on page 56. And so these are the goals that we would show them. And they're so broad that they're likely to be very relevant still. But I want to give people the opportunity to verify that. I don't want to make that decision for them. And I want to give them the opportunity to say, are we missing something? Or should we be, are some of these not relevant anymore? And so,
Is this gonna let, like, when I read this though, I think if I'm a parent and I'm interested in recreation, these are very broad.
they were very
If I want more
broad.
basketball courts, or if I want a bigger summer camp for my
Yeah,
kids, cause
so-
they can't be in the same place,
So
or,
people can be
you know.
more specific than this.
can we say that?
Yes, when I present the activity for them, I can talk about, these are very broad goals. You can be more specific, but remember there's also an action plan. So from these broader goals, and that would be what the second workshop would be about, is what are the action items that we really want to focus on. But they could be more, this is actually quite broad,
Yeah.
and I think they could be more specific than this if they wanted to be.
Seem almost
Yeah.
some of them are unattainable.
There's just a line where it becomes an action step, and so we want to keep it at the higher level goals, but these may
Yeah.
or may not be the goals, you may want to be
Encourage
more
increased
specific
use and
about that. Right.
appreciation, like,
And
what does
some
that
of the
mean?
more specific things that might come out may not be a goal, may end up as
As
Jen
action.
said, as
Yeah.
an
Yeah.
action.
And
item.
we'll
Yeah,
filter
that could
we'll
be-
filter that,
maybe
so
how
that's
goals-
okay.
Relate to action items is maybe more what I'm thinking.
Yeah, and if they end up talking about actions, we can interpolate what the goal is, and we can move that into action. So I wouldn't be, as facilitators, too worried about, if they start talking about the specifics, that's very natural. But if those get recorded, we can figure out what the overarching goal is. And so the discussion would be in 2 sections, 15 minutes each. The first 15 minute, they would get a sheet. I usually use colored sheets, and they're usually large so the note taker can take their notes. And they'd have the questions that are in this paragraph on the sheet. And so that's what you'd be facilitating for the first 15 minutes. So how relevant are these goals? What's missing? How should the goals change or stay the same? How can open space goals be balanced with and reinforce other community goals, such as recreation goals, economic development, housing, transportation, public facilities, energy use? This is on
Oh, sorry.
the first bullet under the first discussion. It's labeled 7:45 right now.
Thank you.
But obviously we'll change those times once we shift things around. And then at 15 minutes, I ring a bell, and 15 minutes will go very fast. Nobody will be bored, and I want every single person at your table to speak. So that means if you have a very long-winded person, you do have to cut them off. And I'm happy to help, so you can always call me over if there's a
And how many people would be, when your staff?
5 to 8
I don't
people
do
at
to-
each table.
Certain people.
But
Right.
how many
But I
staff
can do-
people will
I
you
do it
have
at
here
work.
beside?
I'm bringing one person, and Gino,
And I'll bring one person
Yeah.
too.
So-
And we'll be floating, watching over your tables. Make sure if you need help, you can flag us down. We'll be kind of wandering through the tables. And then at 15 minutes, I ring a bell, we give them the next color sheet. And so put your pink sheets away. We're done with that part of the discussion. Now we're doing the green sheets. And we do the colors because it's very easy for us to see if people are listening to us. If I still see the pink sheet out, I know I need to come over and say we're doing the green sheet now. So then we're going to, I'm hoping to have a map showing the protected and unprotected open space very clearly labeled, so it's easy to see. And we want them to talk not about specific parcels, but we want them to talk about what kind of criteria should we use to consider priorities and to determine priorities. And your prior plan had a few under number 1. It had 3 attributes. It had A, lands that are contiguous to existing protected land, B, high natural resource value and habitat value, and then C, in areas of town which have a shortage of open space and passive active rec. So I want them to think, are there other criteria? Is this still the right criteria? How do we decide? And that will be what we work on between the first community visioning session and the second workshop, is how do you apply that criteria and what properties come to the forefront if you use the criteria folks want you to use. And then at the second workshop, we can test it and we can say, this is what that looks like if you use the criteria. So the second 15 minutes is talking about that criteria. So they're different conversations. And they'll go very
the second
fast.
workshop is open to the public as well?
Yep. And then we have the recreation presentation. So 15 minutes, I'll cut off that discussion. They can keep their sheets because you'll need it to present. And then we go through 20 minutes max. I might be able to cut that down. If I can, I will. What were the key findings on both passive and active recreation, resources and needs? Highlights of the recreation land inventory, so that's part of what this big list is. What did we learn when we looked at that? Review the recreation goals. There's only a few, actually. It's the last 3. And then again, we'll do the same thing. What's changed since in the last 18 years? What has the town accomplished? You've done a lot of work on the fields. We'll talk about these things. And then we'll get them into the small groups. And we're asking the same questions, just of a different category. So first 15 minutes is recreation goals. How relevant are these? What's missing? I actually think there may be things missing, because this doesn't seem like very many goals for recreation. How should the goals change or stay the same? And then and this is important, I think this is one of the most important questions we ask for both categories, is how can these goals be balanced with and reinforce other community goals? Because we don't want people, even though we're just doing an open space recreation plan, we really want them to think of the community as a whole. We're not hired to do a master plan, but we're planners, and we always think about how does this plan relate to all these other things that you're also trying to balance and accomplish. So we want them to at least think about that.
But do you know what all these other things are that we're trying to
We're not
do?
going to present that, so it's only from their own perspective. But when you do the master plan, which I think you're thinking of doing soon, that will be part of, that process as well. And you may come back to this plan and take another look at it at that point. And then we want to give them a map showing recreation lands and facilities. And we want to ask what criteria should be considered to determine recreation priorities to focus public resources, including public funds, and staff volunteer time. Same question we're just asking about. Instead of priorities for conservation, open space conservation, we're asking them about recreation priorities.
And we're making it clear that it's facilities too, that includes buildings and not just open space fields and things? Or does it?
So let me ask Gino, to what extent do you want the conversation to focus on like indoor recreation space and those types of facilities?
Sure, it should be
Yeah,
included too.
okay.
This is all forms of recreation, programs.
So we should make
fields,
that
and
clear in the
facilities.
presentation so
I agree
they
with that,
know.
because actually, when we went over the survey questions, that same thing happened to me. I was only doing fields and outdoor spaces because of
Open
the
space.
wording, open space.
It's open space and recreation,
Right,
not open
right.
space
But
recreation.
we need to explain what recreation and recreation
And so
means.
that will be part of the presentation, the 20 minutes when we're talking about recreation facilities, what the town has, and what you've accomplished. And then we can also shorten up these report outs. We can give you each a minute instead of 2 minutes. There are lots of ways I can shorten up the end of this. And we don't really have to do a 10-minute wrap-up. Sometimes communities like me to hold a few minutes at the end for just open questions, for folks to just ask things that maybe didn't come up, or they just want a little soapbox at the end of the night. And I usually provide that time, but if you want to shorten up the menu, the agenda, we could cut that piece down too.
We could also say that we'll hang around if anybody has additional
Yeah.
questions.
I
But
think
this
that
is-
could be good in saying that the full results will be put in a report and made available on the website too, because I think that they're only gonna get a snippet of
Yes.
being able to hear in that amount of time versus maybe wanting to hear a thorough report of
Yeah.
everybody's discussion.
I agree, yeah,
And that could
absolutely,
save us a little time.
yes.
Now, what you've
absolutely.
just presented is something you've done a number of times, is that correct?
Yes.
A number of different, so what you presented to us is sort of a fine distillate of other presentations, and even though we may have some considerations and queries about cutting here and there, this is what you're presenting as your best effort, the
Yes.
way you think it
I've-
best work for us.
I've done this a lot, I don't
Okay.
even count, I haven't counted all the
All right,
times, yeah.
so we can have our queries, but
Yeah.
I like the idea of going with what you put together here.
Thank you. And I think starting at the registration at 6:45 is a very good way to kind of include that open piece at the beginning, but then start the presentation right at 7.
I do wanna revisit the open space versus rec first. And the question I have is, if we have a ton of recreation people there, is there value for them not really having thought much about the open space, but then having active participation? Will that, you know, I'm not sure. And so it's a question, everybody who's there being involved in everything, will it sway some of the, you know, some of the feedback we're getting on open space, because they just haven't really thought about it going into it? And it's what I'm thinking, right? I mean,
No, I'm with you. I think that those who truly have a passion and a feeling for open space are going to stay no matter what and deal with open space. If you include recreation people who are there because they have little kids and they're worried about the quality of baseball fields, and they're worried about basketball courts, and they're worried about the Sheehan court, to kind of, you know, it's a captive audience. We're making them a captive audience, and we're kind of putting them through these processes that they really don't want to be a part of, and they really don't have a lot of
put the
put
thought
the
into
thought
it.
process into it. I'm not sure, like, it's like, to me, it's like bad data in, bad data out. So we're kind of
It's up to
including
you
people.
guys.
And I think
you
if
should
you,
decide.
I think the thing about recreation is, I think we could really beef up some numbers. And if they wanna leave, cause open space is really not in their,
They might not have a lot
Thought.
to contribute to those discussions.
I think we'd have a better discussion. And
Yeah.
I think for me, I guess, where I'm kinda coming from, I mean, we're a town of highly educated professional people. But when we go to town meeting every year, we're not overloaded with mums and dads, right? We're not overloaded with people who have little kids.
They don't wanna stay.
They don't have time, right? They
Yeah.
don't, so I'm just kind of thinking when I call those in my group in the elementary school paradigm and I say, hey, I need you to come to a meeting on Thursday night, it's gonna be at least 2 hours, like, I don't know, I don't think I'm gonna get a huge response. And I think that, so we could go with it, and it has worked for you, you're the subject matter expert, I'm gonna defer to you. But I really, if we're gonna do it, I do think recreation needs to go first. I don't feel right saying, I need you to come and sit through something that you really don't have an interest in to get to what you do have an interest in.
Yeah, but then you're
doing the same
you're doing the
thing.
same thing to the open
Yeah.
space
Yeah.
people.
Yeah.
And I would think that anyone who's interested in recreation and has children would also be interested in open space. Whereas the reverse, if you're interested in open space and you don't have children, you may not care as much about your recreation. So
But
I
you don't
think,
have kids.
But I
and
don't
you're-
see-
and you're- and
It's
you
on
can say,
Thursday night,
yeah,
you don't have
yeah.
500 things to
Yeah.
do tomorrow.
Yeah, I have kids, and you get one parent stays home and one comes. It's like
Yeah.
town meeting.
But
If
it's
you
like-
care, you put in the effort.
But town meeting is we get kind of the same people to come every year. And we're really trying desperately in this process to tap into those that we don't hear from. And so what's the best way to get at them?
but I think once they get there, this will work. I think we should worry about
I don't think
getting them.
I don't think they're gonna come.
I
Like,
mean,
I know
I
my
don't
close friends, when I call and say it's gonna be at least 2 hours on Thursday night, I'm not gonna get them.
It's gonna work if you shorten the time.
It depends upon what you tell them.
You've gotta shorten the
John,
time.
you've got to be able to remember that people are gonna be coming who have an investment in this town. And if they have young children, most of those people wanna live here a long time. And therefore, if they don't think much about open space now, let's educate
But
them.
Roger, why doesn't that logic work for me at town meeting?
Town meeting is a little different. I think this is,
It's $90 million spend, and it's not, and I can't get them, like, so I guess I'm just, that's my experience.
Yeah, the town meeting doesn't go even longer, and people do stay even longer.
So other than, I guess my question would be, other than it's on the list because it was on the list and you put it first, what?
Yeah,
what
why-
changes
I don't
the-
know what
is it
difference
what
it makes.
changes
You've
the
done this
order?
many times, because these are all
The order
open space
doesn't
and
matter to
recreation
me.
plans.
I just put one first.
Doesn't matter to me either.
But do you typically do one first or the other?
But are the recreation people gonna leave?
Yeah, I
I
know.
know,
But then,
that's the
but then
issue.
they're not gonna have
Okay,
much to
so-
contribute anyway if they
Yeah.
leave. What's the big deal
And
if
if
they
there's a
leave?
fear of them leaving, wouldn't it make sense to pay them the respect to go first then, if we're being honest with
It's
this
up to
thing?
you guys.
If we're all
I'll
sitting here
change
saying
the
that
order
they're
if
gonna
you
leave,
want.
I don't think
Yeah.
I don't think it's fair personally to let them sit through it either.
No,
I think
will-
if we're all fearful that they're gonna leave, we all know that they're gonna leave, and so why, like, why not let them?
I can say that that will come into your presentation at the beginning. So I think a presentation at the beginning talking about the importance and how this matters to everybody, and all the things that we're doing. So I can say that when I came on, on this committee, I didn't realize the scope, and
No, me
it's fascinating, and I'm all in.
Yeah.
So I think other people will do that, and they will go there with the intention of staying for recreation, and they're like, wow, this is actually important. And I think we will get a bunch of them to stay, but we'll definitely lose some.
Yeah, we don't have a recreation plan and an open space plan. We have a recreation and open space plan, and I think people need to see why those two things go together.
Totally agree.
And then if you
And I think
explain
you
that to
will
them, I
have
think they will
people
stay.
that will stay. I think you will have some that
And
just
the
can't, they
presentation
would have
will help,
left
yeah.
anyway, or
Mm.
wouldn't have stayed for the
Or wouldn't have
recreation
come.
piece, wanted to have their input
Yeah.
on that part. I think some will stay. I mean, I actually think the goals that were in the last time the plan was done
Must have been the open space.
more speak to the open space
Yeah.
piece
Right.
of recreation, the more passive recreation type thing. So I think that's
I mean,
pretty
that's why I even
interesting, and
asked about
I do think we're gonna
facilities
pull some
was even
people
part of
who
it.
will want to be a part of that. Just not everyone. I mean,
Do we
there's
actually
gonna be
wanna,
some people who are very specific interest
Yep.
that they're coming for.
do we actually wanna take a vote on this? Why don't we do that? All right, everyone that wants the way it is, open space first and then recreation, raise your hand. Okay, everyone who thinks recreation should go first and then, okay.
Can I ask a question?
This is democracy.
I don't know if this is a Nora question or a
I have
Jen
a whole
question,
list of
but in looking at
things to send out yet.
the 2000 and this paperwork, one thing jumped out at me, maybe I'm way off base. How come we don't say anything about dovetailing services or dovetailing these open spaces with other communities? Why don't we take advantage of
Well, I think
how we back up to Dover?
we are doing that in terms of looking at how open spaces connect the surrounding towns, the open space in surrounding towns. That's part of this process too.
I didn't see that.
But maybe not as, it's part of the overall scope of the plan. It may not be in this discussion for the visioning.
So when we get to a greater level of detail about what our desires are and what the goals are, they may involve doing something in a cooperative nature with another town. That might be what this group decides. The best way to do that is, let's say a skating rink. We might want to build one with another town because one town can't afford a whole rink by itself. So there's a lot of things to think about, but I think that's further down the line.
I was just surprised we didn't take advantage of getting away from the town concept and looking at the county concept and
Yeah.
make use of our resources to share with other communities.
Yeah,
Let's make sure our open
We,
space.
we always have to do that eventually. I mean, we live in Massachusetts where everything is done by towns, and that's a historic fact, and, yeah, and you have to keep aware of, sometimes it's more efficient, and, overall, you can achieve more by cooperating with neighboring towns and doing something regionally. But,
I just thought it
Yeah.
would jump out more in this.
Yeah, it's a
thing to
good
see.
question, and Joe, I'll give you an example right now. A private school in the area has given some ice time, and so Westwood and Needham, for example, have set up some full ice games. So that's a good thought, because I think all the towns are kind of thinking about that, because all of this is so expensive, right? So how do we capitalize
Yeah.
together?
Yeah.
and working with, we have one private school, Zavarian Brothers in town. What things can be done in conjunction with them, we need to think about that also.
Right, right.
Another thing I had thought about when I was reading all of the summary was that some 25 years ago, the YMCA wanted to build a facility here in town, and it was rejected. And as I thought further, and I looked to see where there are nearby YMCA facilities, and the other one that's close is Needham, which is really very poor. I was wondering if we could consider having the YMCA think about a facility down in Westwood Station, somewhere down there, a big open area that.
In fact, at one time for Norwood, they were thinking of one in the Norwood section of University Avenue. So, yeah, that's something to think about.
So what I'd like to say is I'm listening to all of you coming up with ideas already,
Yeah.
which is great, which is part of your job. When you are facilitating a table, I'm gonna ask that you walk a very fine line, because on one hand, I want your ideas integrated into the discussion. But on the other hand, you are in a position where you're gonna get to talk about this a lot more than anybody else at that meeting. And your ideas will be fleshed out in this forum. So I wanna make sure that you walk that line where you can integrate some things, like dovetailing, with other communities, open space or recreation, or the idea of the YMCA. But I just wanna make sure that you're very cautious not to monopolize the conversation and really integrate them quickly, but really let other folks talk. And that's mostly your job, is to facilitate them getting through these questions, making sure that the folks that tend to monopolize the conversation, you need to cut them down in a very polite way and and I'm gonna be talking through what we are expecting for a good conversation, so I lay out ground rules about, if you're a person that likes to talk, try to, control that aspect and really get to the point. And if you're a person that you'd rather just observe, try to, push yourself to at least contribute a little bit more than you do. So I try to even it out, and that's part of your job. You want to hear from everybody at the table, and you don't want people to be overshadowed. So that's your primary job, really.
You really want to keep things on course rather than steer the course.
Exactly.
Can I ask one more question? Is there any chance, Nora, since you're doing the sign-up, I'm sure some people will give you their email, that we can send out some of this material in advance? This isn't a correct statement, but I'm more knowledgeable about the open space than I am about the recreation. I would love a one-page synopsis before I go to the meeting. Wow, look at all the rec stuff we have, look at what we don't have, sort of thing. Look at the open space that we have, look at the trails we have in Lowell, just one page.
So
In case you
what-
can't tell,
I
like
think
short
what we
and one
can do-
page.
And I'm the
I
opposite
think
of
what
you.
we can do is we can have on our
Yeah,
website
in
the
terms of
documents
knowledge.
that are ready
Yeah.
by the first, and people can look at those. So, for instance, I know Todd and Nicole, you were working on a listing of facilities. That will be something that'll be ready. So anything we have ready, we can put a link to the webpage and they can pull up the information that's there. They'll also have a full copy of the old open space and recreation plan, the take a hike brochure, for people who are interested in that.
And that will go out in an email?
No, we had that.
So the email will reference the.
Right up
Link.
the
No, there'll be a
page, the
hyperlink-
town- yeah, there'll be
hyperlink in the
hyperlink
email.
that'll get
Yeah.
people to that.
Because
Yes.
sometimes the web can be, that page can be,
Well, it'll take them not to the homepage, it'll take them to a page about open
specific.
space and recreation.
yeah, so it'll be hyperlinked.
Yeah, so we
Okay.
can set that up.
And you'll have a map of the open space properties, as best we
I
can.
will get what we can,
hope so.
so that's something that, GIS has to put together, we'll see what they can do.
At a minimum, Mass GIS has a
Yes.
layer of that, which
Yes.
we could get that together at least.
All right, so now we said we would keep our meetings to no more than 2 hours, so I think we're ready to wrap up. The only thing that we didn't do is set our next meeting date, which will be after the visioning session. So I will send everyone an email with possible choices. Wednesdays and Thursdays seem to have been the best days last time. Is that still the case, everyone? Okay. So we'll be meeting sometime in February.
Not school vacation.
Not school
Nah.
vacation. No.
Probably not the week after, so that.
It'll probably,
be that-
it'll probably be
that
week
second
before,
week.
yeah.
Maybe we should
Mhm.
keep, maybe we should keep it Thursdays.
Thursday's
Yeah,
better?
Maybe,
Well, It is for me, but I'm not just saying for me, since it's working now, I'm thinking maybe.
is Thursday good for everyone?
Yeah,
Mhm.
Thursday.
And Wednesday is, because I know for me, some Wednesdays
We never had a problem on
Wednesday's not
Wednesday.
difficult on cost.
No,
Wednesdays are better.
It's the first.
Yeah.
Just the
The
first.
first.
So maybe you
Okay.
should try Thursday.
Okay, so we will probably go with the second Thursday, but I'll
Yeah.
send it on the email. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.